People today, when they come on board, they're looking for what's in it for me. 35 years ago, when people joined an organization, they normally tended to retire from there. Today, if you get people to work for 5 years, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
You can expect that the employee value proposition that an employee today wants is going to be different. He wants, or he or she wants to be contemporary all the time. And if an organization does not invest in his or her development and growth, they will tend to look
Elsewhere.
Here we go.
Good afternoon. Jify is very excited to welcome an esteemed guest we have with us this afternoon, Mr. Roy Joseph, who is an advisor and a friend and who has an illustrious career spanning 30 years in human resources. Most recently, Mr. Roy was VP of HR and Services at MRF Worldwide. He is very well known in this space, has pioneered several initiatives for organizations to adopt pro-employee practices and corporate social responsibility, and we're here today to learn from him about how the HR space has evolved. So welcome, Mr. Roy. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Meganka.
Mr. Roy, you have, as mentioned, been across a bunch of domains in the human resources space. Would you like to share some of the highlights of your career with us? We'd love to hear from you what some of your personal highs are.
You're really making me go back into memory lane. Let me try and delve into that. See, when I started my career at that point in time in 1987, there was nothing as HR. It was all personnel and industrial relations. And I chose to start in industrial relations because to work with people on the workflow. And I built my career on that to understand what makes people tick. And this is when I first also saw what debtedness could be like. And surprisingly, even when people are paid very well, it does not mean that they'll be out of the debt trap. Because they earn more, so they want to spend more. And with the avenues of spend being very limited for that class of people, many of them would get into alcoholism. And when you get into alcoholism, it leads to absenteeism. And when it leads to absenteeism, you start cutting your pay cut. And when your pay gets reduced, they start borrowing money from outside because their families had to live.
Right.
And there came a time when these people were being absent month on month. They were getting no wages. And the Kabuliwala will be waiting outside the factory gate. And like all good companies, they would try every single disciplinary measure, charge sheet, suspension, but you cannot, kick a person out because of this, because the laws will not support you. So that's when I first delved into it and said that, look, we've tried everything. Now, obviously, punishment is not working. So let's look at it another way. And that's when we actually employed social scientists to help us.
Okay.
To understand, what is making these people do these things? What is the problem there at home? And how do you find a solution? Because giving them a charge sheet, suspension, and then punishing them, seeing their 40 days of suspension, whatever, is not doing the work. That's when we went to their homes along with lady counselors, and we realized the gravity of the situation. You had the wife who was perhaps doing some work in different homes to let the chula in the house,
Run. Yeah.
Children, school going, often couldn't go to school because they could not pay the fees. Or if they had the children who were slightly older, about to get married, but they didn't have money for the dowry. And the dowry system did exist. This is when we got into using, working with the families to make them understand what happens when he does not come to work. We also extrapolated his earnings, his PF, his gratuity, etc. Look, this is what he could be earning at the end of his tenure of 28 years, 30 years, or 32 years, as the case may be. Because many of them join at the age of 18, 19, 20.
Right.
And this is what he's losing out. Then came the problem, how do you go about weaning these people out of alcoholism? So that's when I went back to the company. I said, look, this is the issue. Obviously, charge sheet suspension not working. So this is what you suggest. I said, I need a one-time help, and that is basically do a rehab work with these people in a rehabilitation center. We need to bear the cost. The whole idea is that we have these people rehabilitated rehabilitated and back in the company. And that would save their families. That would also help us with regard to our attendance and productivity. Long story cut short, I got the approval. Maybe because I was young at that point in time and everyone said, okay, fine, he's got an idea. Let's not discourage him because we want him to continue in the organization. We worked that and we saw a big change in these people. This was in Bata when I was my first organization. And then that was replicated, or that model was replicated or used in other factories too. In Patna itself, there was a huge absenteeism problem. So in the peak months, our absenteeism would be roughly about 40%, which means you couldn't run the assembly line. And if you cannot run the assembly line, your production from that one assembly line is over. And as a result, you cannot manufacture double the number of shoes or slippers or whatever the next day. So that was, in fact, one of the defining moments for me because that's when I realized you don't need to be only harsh and hard with people. There is another way of looking at this, of getting people. At that point in time, this financial wellness, etc., was not something that was thought of. But when I look back today, in a way, what we were doing is financial wellness for people. And that was the first foray into it. And then we built on that. And today, of course, it's come to a much bigger platform.
So would it be fair to say that your journey into the human resource space was largely rooted in you being able to see a lot of financial wellness gaps in the workforce and also a lot of areas that you could play a role in improving overall employee wellness?
One of the areas, yes, definitely. Because when you're working in HR, it's not only about maintaining discipline. There are two aspects to it. One is maintaining discipline. And just like you need to motivate the so-called white-collar employees, you need to motivate the blue-collar employees. And frankly, what do they have to look forward to? They don't get the perks, they don't get the sort of salaries, they don't get the sort of education. And many of them actually don't want their children to do the jobs that they are doing. They want their children to be educated. They want their children to be chartered accountants, engineers, etc. And this is where I saw an opportunity saying that we could actually do this counseling with people and get them to say that, look, envision your own children to be working as an engineer or a manager or whatever. If you need to do that, what is it that you need to do in order to ensure that your children have a better future than you have? Just because you have got this job, it doesn't mean that is a legacy that needs to continue with the next few generations. It can change.
Right.
And the whole idea was to get them to envision that and to dream that. And once you dream, then to make it come into reality was what we started. Then it became a lot more easy.
So it seems like a lot has changed in the HR space in the last decade even. Would you be able to share maybe some trends, some thens and nows? What do you see as a big evolution between your start almost 30 years ago when these were big problems to sort of how the space looks now?
I think one of the biggest changes, see, when we came out from the campus, any recruiter who would come to the campus would say, okay, start working in industrial relations. Today, boys and girls passing out from the premier institutes or even the second-tier institutes do not want to dirty their hands in industrial relations. It is tough. It is not easy. But they don't want to dirty their hands there. They all want to do a corporate job. And I've been for so many interviews and they say, I want to do something strategic. Now, when you ask them what is strategic, they really have no idea what the S of strategy is all about.
Right.
So the big change is that suddenly there's been an explosion, that the internet has come. You get a lot more reading about HR and the latest of it.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to be doing jobs which are right up there, but no one wants to do the basics. And you see that now coming up. You see issues with the Hero Motors, with Maruti, etc., where industrial strife is again cropping up. Because if you ignore the people down below, if you do not know how to handle them, if you do not know how to motivate them, if you don't know how to nurture them, it is going to come back and bite you. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges that not only just HR folks, but the entire organizations are going to face.
So it's fair to say then that a big part of HR's role is working on employee well-being across different strata within the organization.
Definitely.
So how would you define employee well-being today then, specifically for that, overlooked strata that you're just mentioning?
Well, today you talk about an employee value proposition. the employee value proposition that existed 35 years ago and today is very, very different.
Right.
Today, when we started our career, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the email. It was a slow mail. You want to write letters, you could write letters. So how much could you write?
Yeah.
And if something happened in one particular organization, even within your own organization, one factory, it would often take a couple of days for it to reach you. Today, you get to know instantaneously. And people start comparing. My batchmate there, my batchmate here, and many of them are working abroad. So the employee value proposition today that exists has to be very, very different than what it was at that point in time. People today, when they come on board, they're looking for what's in it for me. 35 years ago, when people joined an organization, they normally tended to retire from there. Today, if you get people to work for 5 years, it's a big thing. Many organizations have superannuation or even gratuity being paid if you work for 2 years. That was never heard of.
Yeah.
And because the whole idea and the concept of longevity has changed. People are more in a hurry. And I think it's also fair to say that the demand-supply gap has changed drastically. So when all these things have changed, you can expect that the employee value proposition that an employee today wants is going to be different. He or she wants to be contemporary all the time. And if an organization does not invest in his or her development and growth, they will tend to look elsewhere.
So, sounds to me like HR has to do less balancing of the needs of the company on the one hand and the needs of the employee, and they're converging a little bit because the needs of the company and the needs of the employee have to meet at some point. So how have you seen technology, obviously we keep talking about technology today, how have you seen that help converge the needs of the company versus the needs of the employee?
See, a lot has been talked about technology coming in and, in artificial intelligence, and they're taking away a lot of roles. Technology can at best support, right? It can help you understand if an employee is unhappy fairly early rather than do it as a post-mortem. It can help you understand what is ticking, what is not ticking, what needs to be inputted in order that a particular employee is able to rise up to the next level.
Yeah.
Technology today is helping you understand what sort of a need will arise in the future, because the needs that you have today are not going to be the needs that you have tomorrow. Technology will also help you in your succession plan. You're working on something today, but these may not be the requirements of the future. So how do you identify potential, for example? You can identify performance for the year. So you have very strong and robust mechanisms for it. But to identify potential, because that is something which is very nebulous. Does the person have the potential to go 2 rungs up? Because you don't know what the 2 rungs up is going to look like after 5 years or 10 years. I mean, gone are the days when you had a tall hierarchy. Today you have a flat hierarchy.
Yeah.
Gone are the days when you had hierarchical control. So today, for example, influencing is going to be a major competency, because you will have to be working in cross-functional teams with people over whom you do not have hierarchical control, and they don't need to listen to you, they don't need to obey you.
Yeah.
That's when your influencing competency, influencing ability will come to the forefront. So technology is actually enabling us to realize what are the shifts that are going to happen or is going to happen, and to be ready with it. And if you identify something today for the next 5 years, it need not be constant.
Understood.
You'll have many black swan events. Your COVID was one black swan event.
Absolutely.
2008, you had a financial crisis, a black swan event. 2013, the entire auto industry in India tanked. That was another black swan event. COVID is, of course, what we remember very, very clearly. But today, you're looking at the specter of recession globally. Mercifully, we have not been touched. But global companies are facing it. So you will have many of these things happening. So gone are the 5-year plans. Gone are the 2-year plans and 3-year plans. Even your annual plan, if it can see the entire 12 months, is a big thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to double click on the fact that you mentioned the pandemic. Jify often says that the pandemic helps for a slight change in both employers and employees' perception of what it means to work at a company, what they're looking for with employers. And financial well-being, a theme that you've touched on earlier, came out very strongly. So we've seen a lot that both employers and employees have realized that they want to work with people and want to be at a place that prioritizes this financial well-being. I'd love to hear from you if there's any best practices you've seen across the globe where technology has been able to play a role in that. Any leaders that come to mind, any companies, just thoughts?
See, in fact, this is where a lot of Indian companies have come to the forefront, where the humaneness. See, you can be a human, but how to be a humane manager? And that's where the distinction arises, and that's where it will differentiate. So if you look at it, you had Hyatt running as a great hotel, but during the pandemic, they closed and they didn't pay. But you had someone like the Taj and you had someone like the ITC Welcome Group who said, no, we will pay our people their salaries. Now, these are Indian companies. Though ITC is part of a multinational, but it's very much like an Indian company. MRF, for example, they didn't cut the salary of a single employee. We'll ensure the payment goes. Now, what has this done to people is also build their loyalty to the company. Have they leveraged much of technology at that point in time? No. Frankly, when the pandemic hit, no one knew how to handle it. No one knew. But did they use technology then to overcome it and to ensure that the modicum of business operated? Yes, they did.
Absolutely.
So you've had more and more people, for example, use digital payment.
Yeah.
You had more and more people use Skype and Zoom call and team meetings to ensure that the continuity actually happened. So technology, I won't say it was forced, but necessity is the mother of invention. So people had to find ways and people found ways. And those who were not used to handling a Zoom call or a Teams meeting call learned how to handle it. And that's when technology really helped you show that entire.
So it's fair to say, it sounds to me like you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that working with employees on their overall well-being has, of course, like you said, improved their loyalty, improved the retention. Do you think it has a role in improving their productivity as well in the workplace?
Definitely. See, let's face a fact. If I have, as a workman, if I have financial constraints, financial issues, you cannot expect that I will leave it at home when I come to work. It will be worrying me because I'll say, how do I ensure my child's education? How do I pay the fees? How do I pay the expenses for an unprecedented medical emergency? Now, if financially I'm being bogged down, my mind is going to get preoccupied with it. And if that happens, my productivity will suffer. No matter how much of training you give me, how much of motivational talks you give me, look, this is the basic. I am working to earn money in order to feed my family and to nurture them and to nourish them and to ensure my children have a good future.
Do you think employees take well to it that a company would prioritize their financial well-being? Are they welcoming employers into that space? Are they looking for that in employers?
Today, very much, because word spreads. So when people come to talk, when people living in the same colony or the same society, they say, look, hey, my company did not deduct. And I'll give you my own experience. Our driver, we were not going to be using him. He never expected that he would be paid. Because all the other drivers in the society, they either did not get paid or they were paid 1/3 or 1/4 or even half at the most.
Right.
So then, and normally my wife is the one who distributes the salary to the domestic staff. So she gave it. She said, so you're saying you give me the full? He says, yes, because my husband's got his full salary. If he's got his full salary, we have said that, okay, you people should also get your full salary, though my husband's not going to work. And it's no fault of yours also. So therefore, we are ensuring you also get the same thing. I think that opened the eyes of these people a lot more. And when people start talking, saying that, hey, so-and-so, this neighbor of mine or this friend of mine, his organization has paid the full. My organization has cut. I would rather work for an organization which takes care of me. Now, the broad things take care of me, but actually what is it? Take care of my financial wellness. They may not articulate it that way. It will be articulated as they take care of me. But actually, it's basically financial wellness because you got to hone it down. Like take care of you means, okay, I can send you some medicines. That's also taking care. But what's more important is to ensure the financial wellness is taken.
Right.
And many organizations, for example, in MRF, what we did then was to help people start investing wisely. We said that you cannot come to a situation where you do not have money in other exigency. And things like a COVID can actually repeat another 4 to 5 years. So please ensure that you start investing. And we actually got experts to come and help them. So that whenever they save the money, you need to save this much, start investing for the future. I think that's when people start realizing that, yes, this company is taking care of me. They're interested in my financial wellness. They're interested in my future. Therefore, I need to give my best to the organization.
Absolutely. How do you cultivate a leadership mindset like this within companies? Leadership obviously has a big role to bring on these initiatives into the company and to foster this top-down. So, in your opinion, how have your conversations sort of helped you change minds, open eyes, push leaders to being more benevolent, if I can say?
First thing is to make them understand that you have a class of people who are different from you. You can afford to go without a salary for 2 or 3 years because you have that bank balance. But these people don't. Then the question comes, but they are being paid reasonably well. Yes, they are being paid reasonably well, but they have not been as fortunate as you or me, or as educated as you or me, to invest wisely so that they can actually take care of a rainy day. So then what do? So here comes this, and we took several conversations with the leadership, making them understand that you lose nothing. But what do you gain? See, end of the day, you have got to make them understand that what you gain is going to be far more than what you're giving. And that's a fact. They have realized that, look, if I'm doing this, the return is basically that these people are going to be loyal, and more importantly, their productivity is going to be higher. If my productivity is higher, my sales and my profitability all are going to be higher. This is just a small cost that I'm...
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. I hope you get to influence a lot more leaders in this space. I guess if you had any words for a company like Jify, which of course is foraying into the financial well-being space, we are working to offer employees not just, like you're saying, the salary advances, but also the savings. How can a company like Jify continue to enable continuous discovery so we continue to find those gaps in employee pain points and work to solve that? Any sort of advice for positions or organizations like Jify today?
See, firstly, I would like to commend Jify because I think they've taken a pioneering stand in this. There are many companies that offer salary advances. I don't want to name them, but there are many. They all came on that plank of saying that we are offering you salary advances. Now, that has a very limited scope. But I think Jify has enhanced the scope to actually look at things like financial wellness. I think that's the first step which is taken wisely. And I think there needs to be a lot more of partnership because Indian household is very different. I mean, if you look at, I come from Kerala. If you look at Kerala, then every household will want to invest in some gold for the daughter's marriage. You like it or not, that is going to stick. It's not going to change. Which case, how do you ensure that you are actually being able to help them invest in a little bit of gold? Maybe a gram or half a gram every month. So that by the time when it comes to the daughter's wedding, they have enough and more to take care. There are a lot of schemes being run by jewelers. The whole idea is to, how do you partner that? How do you get them to see that so they also find that there is a skin of their teeth in it? And I think those are the steps that Jify can further take. The change also is that workmen today are a lot more ambitious for their children. They would want their children to go abroad. They have no clue what that entails. I sent my kids abroad. After the very first year, the expenses went up by 25%. It's not that the fees went up, but the dollar rate went up.
Correct.
So without the fees going up, I had to actually spend more Indian rupees to ensure that I could continue the education. So when you look at there's nothing wrong with these workmen also wanting their children to go and study abroad for a better future, for better education. What does it entail? These are the different expenses. And guess what? There is an inflationary expense also coming on. How do you take care of that? And also the fact that the rupee dollar or the rupee pound or the rupee euro, the exchange rate can start fluctuating.
Right, absolutely.
How do you take care? So therefore, how do you start investing in that?
Yeah.
So you cannot start investing in a bank FD because that erodes your wealth. So you start investing in a mutual fund at a very early age so that it starts giving you inflation beating returns. The other aspect is that so long as you're working in a company, the company often takes care of your medical expenses. Now, the other major component of post-retirement is on the medical expenses, hospitalization. Inflation there is very, very heavy. So have they taken care of that, for example, in the future? So these are some of the elements that
we
also
can pay attention to. Perfect. Thank you. That we're going to take that to heart and look into that. Just a few quick, rapid questions, just to lighten the environment. Where was your first source of financial, like who or where was your first source of financial knowledge?
Good question. See, before joining XLR Jamshedpur, I was doing my chartered accountancy.
Okay.
So I cleared my entrance and cleared my inter. So I had some financial knowledge. I was also very fortunate because I grew up in Calcutta and there were a lot of Marwadi friends who were very good in finance. And the Marwadis, they would tell me that when a child is born in our family, an income tax file is opened immediately. That never happened with us.
Yeah.
But they are the ones who actually ingrained in me how to start investing.
Got it.
And there's something which I'll never forget. They told me that a rupee saved is a rupee earned.
My dad says that as well, yeah.
So they were my first educators. And today being Guru Purnima, I always remember my friends who actually taught me this and led me into this journey right from the very beginning.
What outside of all the companies, of course, that you've worked in and the cultures you've led, what's a company you look to that has a really good culture?
Cultures are very unique. There is no one culture which fits everything. There is no one culture which is better than the other. I was fortunate to work in organizations where the culture was good. Pluses and minuses would always be there. And MNC-wise, I would always look at British American Tobacco because they had a fantastic culture of taking care of their people. In Indian organizations, I would always say MRF was a great culture.
What's the one thing you loved about MRF's culture that you would like startups to replicate or young companies to replicate?
They actually had the welfare of an employee at the core of their hearts. So MRF is not a great paymaster, but they actually ensured that the welfare of the employee was taken care of. So whether it's a post-retirement medical benefit or whatever it is, and if someone has exhausted their medical limit, and there's a real need, they would go up, it would always be sanctioned.
Got it. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Roy. Jify is very, very grateful to work with you. Thank you for your time.